Good morning. Welcome. Well, I'm still thinking today about remembering and remembrance. You know, what is that famous thing that is said of history? That people who forget history and don't learn from the mistakes that were made in the past are doomed to repeat them. There is something very important about remembering what happened. And I'm so glad that, in spite of the fact that our media at times can be really very irritating and really very doom-laden and fear-mongering and all the problems that there are with media, we do have access to a lot of programs which document what happened during either the First World War, but particularly the Second World War. Terry and I have recorded and are watching a series of programs about the war factories that were established during the Second World War to produce the planes and the armaments needed to defeat the Nazi regime in Europe. And it's very interesting. And it reminds us of what effort was required to defeat a tyrant like Hitler. And remembering what happened is very important. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's very dangerous, some of the aspects of thinking today, which is to change history and to rewrite history and to leave out some of the bits of history and put an emphasis on bits of history that never had emphasis before. It's changing history is very dodgy, but that's an aside. I do apologise for that. Don't go down that way of thinking. I'm thinking, and I was so pleased yesterday at my church fellowship meeting that during the talk, various verses were read which talk about remembering. And it made me think of a verse in Judges chapter 8. It's written after Gideon, one of the great judges. If you don't know the story of Gideon, do have a read of it. It's in Judges, or I don't know where he starts, Judges 6 to 8. If you don't know the story, not familiar with the story of Gideon, that's where to find it. Judges chapters 6 to 8. And he dies, and then this is the comment that the people of Israel went back to serving the gods that they had been serving before Gideon helped them, before God raised Gideon to rescue them from the trouble that they were in. And it says in verse 34, "And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show kindness to the family of Jerubbaal," that is Gideon, "in return for all the good that he'd done to Israel." So they did not remember the Lord their God who had rescued them. And if you read the book of Judges, this is the pattern that God helps them in response to their cry for help, because something awful is happening. There's an invading force come into the land and they need help, and they ask God for help. And he responds by raising up a leader called a judge who leads them in battle against the enemy. And but as soon as they are at peace again, they forget all about God and they do all the things that they were doing before. And the judge dies, the period of time that judge leads ends, and God, and then they're in trouble again, and they only reach out to God when they're in dire need. And that is the mistake that they made. They only remembered to cry out to God when everything was bad and awful and horrible. And that is something to learn from Judges, that we need to remember the Lord our God every day, in the good times as well as the bad. We need to be committed to him, following him, and serving him and worshipping him, not just using him as a rescue package. He's not a glorified what was I going to say? He's not a glorified ambulance or fire engine or what do they call them? A lifeboat. He's not a he will rescue, and he does rescue, and quite often people come to him to begin with when everything's gone wrong and they don't know where else to turn, and they suddenly cry out to God because there's nothing left, nothing else to reach out to, and they cry out to God. And thank the good Lord that he is not a man, that he doesn't respond by saying, well, you didn't want me any other time. Why should I respond to you now that you suddenly turn to me? He's not like that. He reaches out and rescues. If you call on the Lord, he will answer. He will come. He will answer. He will rescue. He will reach into your life and help you. He is so gracious, and he is so faithful, and he's so kind. But to get the most out of our life, we need to remember the Lord our God every day. To commit our day to him. A good way of putting it is to say, Lord, what are you going to do today? Can I join in? Can I help you? Can I be part of your plan today? That's a wonderful way to approach him and welcome him into whatever's happening in your life. And I'm going to go back to the idea of inviting you to write a psalm. We wrote psalms at the beginning in the first lockdown, remembering that David wrote psalms, many psalms, and every turn in his life he wrote a psalm, and many of them are dedicated and timed in his life to this was written when this was happening, when David was in the wilderness, or Saul was chasing David, or when he was with the Philistines, all sorts of things, and there's even a psalm written after he sinned with Bathsheba. So there is a psalm written. But we were talking yesterday about remembering the wonderful things that God has done in our life. That's what makes a psalm so important, is if you write a psalm that is about your life, and I write one about my life, and I say, when this happened in my life, God helped me. When this was going on in my life, God was there for me. When I didn't know what to do, God spoke to me through this book or through this message and changed my life forever. We were reflecting on remembering yesterday, and writing a psalm like that is a wonderful thing, to remember that God was there in all the difficult things in our life and in all the wonderful things in our life. I was reflecting this morning, one of the most wonderful moments of my life was when my first child was born. The wonder of this new life which came out of my body, and what it did to me in my spirit and in my heart, the absolute wonder of a new life being born. I can't describe it really, but it was a life-changing moment. Record them, write down the moments when God really touched your life through something somebody said, or a book you read, or somewhere you visited, or some event that happened in world history that really touched your life. Write them down in a psalm, because then it makes it easier to remember them, because all you've got to do is find the psalm and remember what God did to help you. Remembering is very good. Dwelling on the past is not good, especially if we're dwelling on the bad things that have happened in our life. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about remembering with thankfulness God's presence in our lives, so that we live our lives with him involved in every part of our life. Have a great day today. See what you come up with. Yeah, it's a day for another psalm. It's a different lockdown. May feel very much the same, but it's a different lockdown. It's a new event, and things have happened this year that can bear with being remembered. How good God has been to us. Bye for now. See you tomorrow.